on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever you're watching across the United Kingdom or around the world, this is Patrick Christys tonight, late edition. I'm Will Kingston. Coming up tonight.
I know many across Britain are still struggling with the cost of living. Helping with that is my priority.
Yeah, we get that. The PM making some big promises there, but can he keep them? Well, on the Independent front page, there is a shock poll. 1/3 of Labor voters say Starmer should quit. Again, quite frankly, I'm surprised it is that low. Do you agree? In one of the more leading questions I've asked on television. Plus,
because the rhetoric we hear about stopping the boats and smashing the gangs, none of this is working. In fact, there's evidence that this whole performative cruelty is actually pushing up the price of boat crossings.
well, you know my views on this, but it looks like some people think that the Greens party leader, Zach Polanski, talks sense splashing on the I paper. And indeed, he is, of course, cutting through with many people on the left side of politics. In the I paper, we're also hearing that there is the threat to Labor from Reform and the Greens. It does put the UK in a new political era, as Matthew Stadlen said earlier. Plus, should Reform be allowed seats in the House of Lords? Well, that's splashing on the Telegraph. Give Reform seats in the House of Lords. Senior Tory MP tells Starmer, or I should say senior Tory story tells Starmer. And the King's message is on a lot of the front pages, of course, as well, with the Mirror front page, my faith in our future. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is the late edition where we'll be taking you through the Boxing Day papers so you're ahead of the game for the discussions that come on what will be a cracking Boxing Day tomorrow. The Mirror is saying the King's message to the nation, my faith in our future. Charles inspired by shared values of community heroes from all backgrounds. The Independent shock poll, 1/3 of Labor voters say Starmer should quit. The I, threat to Labor from Reform and the Greens, puts the UK in a new era. The Daily Telegraph, teacher likened to terrorist for a Trump film. We'll certainly be going over that one. Charlie Rowley has his eye on that. The Guardian, experts criticise a lost decade of progress on the rights for planners, on the rights of parents, but I note in the bottom left, planners say new towns lack ambition. Alliteration getting the better of me there. The Times, 25 people a day are dying on an NHS waiting list, and that certainly is another very serious story that we will be covering. The Daily Mail, Reeves £1 billion Boxing Day sales slump. Of course, we talked earlier to Michael Kill about the desperate situation that many pubs are finding themselves in across the country. And finally, the Daily Express, you give children the gift of freedom. Generous readers donate £100,000 for youngsters' personalised wheelchairs, which is a lovely story to round out Christmas Day. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. Former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley and political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Gents, let's start with, I think, what is probably the most serious and pressing concern, which is the NHS waiting list. We have a story from the Times saying that 25 people a day are dying on the NHS waiting list. The SNP is urged to act on heartbreaking figures. So what do you make of this, Charlie?
Well, of course, it's in relation to Scotland, and so we've known for years that there's a problem in Scotland, whether it's through drug and alcohol abuse, whether it's through all the investment that from the whole UK pot goes into the health service and the education service, and for years...
I would add on that, I've looked at the deaths of despair statistics, so drugs and alcohol across Europe, and from memory, Scotland leads the deaths of despair across Europe by quite a significant margin. It is a tragic situation.
Totally. But we've had for a long time, we've had the SNP in power in Holyrood in Scotland, whether it's through first of all Alex Salmond and then Nicola Sturgeon, telling us how terrible it is to be part of the UK and how great that St Nicola was during the pandemic. Well, as a classic example here, in Scotland, the SNP haven't lived up to expectations. They haven't delivered on what people expect. And they're now at a point where NHS Scotland is facing this crisis where people are waiting for, whether it's a cataract operation, whether it's a knee or hip replacement, they are dying before even getting through the ward doors. That is completely unacceptable for a country that does get a lot of money from the Barnett formula within the UK, but is also a brilliant country. I love Scotland. I go there many, many times. But this is way below the standards that are expected of the Scottish people, and it needs to be sorted out.
Matthew, just before you respond, I actually want to read out the first paragraph word for word because I don't want to mislead anyone here. The first paragraph literally says from the Times, and if I'm reading this correctly, this is barely believable, patients on hospital waiting lists in Scotland are dying at the rate of 25% a day, figures have revealed. In the first 9 months of the year, more than 7,000 people waiting to see specialists or receive treatment died before their appointment. Age Scotland, the charity, described the statistics as heartbreaking. I'll repeat that, and Matthew, call me up on this if I'm misreading this. Patients on hospital waiting lists in Scotland are dying at the rate of 25% a day. What do you make of that?
That's appalling. I was going to read it myself.
Sorry, 25 per day. Sorry, I may have misread that. 25.
I've forgotten my glasses, but I was going to give it a go myself. But
25 people per day on hospital waiting.
So 7,000 people. So in the first 9 months of this year, 7,000 people waiting to see specialists or receive treatment died before their appointment.
Yeah.
Now, of course, people die, unfortunately, all the time, and some people will die when they're waiting for a procedure. It might be completely unrelated, but on the face of it, the statistics appear pretty damning. The number dying while waiting for planned treatment, including cataract removals and hip or knee replacements, has risen 110% since 2019. That's an important figure because that's a relative figure, it's a comparative figure. And I know the pain that people experience on waiting lists, not just physical pain, but emotional, psychological pain. My father-in-law languished in the dying days of the Tory government, languished on waiting lists. And I mean, it got to the point where he was gowned up and ready to go for a back operation. And then it was decommissioned at the last minute because there was an emergency and the doctor had to go elsewhere. And this happened once, maybe even twice. It wasn't until the third time that he was actually seen. And when you're on a waiting list for that long, and there are millions of people who have experienced something similar across the country, it's bad for your mental health, it's bad for your physical health, it's bad for the economy. That's why Labour have to take this story, which is in Scotland, because if you look at the headline, you immediately assume it's in England, but it's in Scotland. And they have to say to themselves, because I was talking earlier, the political side of this. First of all, it's the human cost, but there's the political side as well. I said earlier, if Labour can really significantly, they've I think, brought waiting lists down a little bit, but if they can significantly bring them down, amongst other things, then they can start showing people that the country can change. They've got to take this as a real warning sign, though.
Here's what I've never fully understood, and I didn't grow up in England or Scotland. I didn't grow up receiving NHS treatment. When this political debate does come up, a lot of people reflexively almost treat the NHS like a religion, and any change is treated with deep suspicion. Now, there's also people who say any change when it comes to looking at private healthcare will instantly in their mind think of an American privatised model as opposed to simply strengthening the private system, which would alleviate pressure on the public system. Charlie, I'll go to you on this. Do you think that the way that we talk about the NHS is almost dogmatic, and how do you have a more sensible conversation which can lead to policy change so less people die?
Well, it's only through sensible conversation, rational conversation, where you've got to look at a number of options, and the people that want to politicise the NHS should be the ones that should be banished from the room. So there is no problem, for example, small policy suggestions that have come up time after time, charging people to use their GP, whether it's a £5 charge to go and see your GP. Because I think we live in a country now where there are far too many people that rush to... can't get a GP appointment, but those that do might not necessarily need it. There are far too many people that present themselves at A&E every weekend when it is traditionally more crowded and busy than during the week, who do not need to be there. And so we have to make sure that, in order to protect the NHS, to make sure that it is a service that can be used for all of us here and everybody at home, free at the point of use, if they have any kind of critical illness, whether it's an accident or a fall, or whether it's something more deeper and sustained, that service is there to be used, and they will not have the worry about funding their healthcare.
What would you think about a small co-payment? It costs small.
No, very strongly would push back on that. It's not that we shouldn't be able to have that conversation. And to that extent, you're right. We obviously, in a democracy, should be able to talk about the way we model something as important as our healthcare. For me, it's certainly not a religion. And where the NHS fails, it absolutely needs to be scrutinised, because otherwise, how on earth is it going to get better? But the idea, the principle of free on the point of delivery, different question about who provides the service behind the scenes, as it were. But free on the point of delivery, I think most people in this country think is an incredibly important principle. It's not just a principle, because if we were to go down your model, inevitably, it would be a slippery slope. It wouldn't stop and start at £5. It would go deeper. And it is so essential that people feel that they can go to their doctor and they can get treated when they're ill. It's one of the most fundamental parts of being a British citizen.
I totally get that, and just for absolute clarity, it's not my personal model, but it was one that was obviously in the last Tory manifesto, I think, or it was suggested about, and we've had a conversation before about charging for their GP. But the question is, when we're spending so much more money on the NHS year after year, but it's not treating actually that many more patients compared to comparative years, but it balloons in terms of the budget.
Our population has gone up significantly.
But the actual use, I mean, Robert Jenrick says it, an awful lot. I've seen him on countless shows where, the NHS doesn't actually see more people incrementally increase year after year, but it gets a huge amount of money. But yet we constantly talk about waiting lists going up. We constantly talk about people can't get a GP appointment. So something has to be done structurally, exactly. But
that doesn't mean changing the basic model of free at the point of delivery. The hope was that Wes Streeting was going to start to reform the NHS in various ways, and so far I think there's been a bit of disappointment about the pace of change.
Well, also the strikes don't help. When doctors are going on strike,
set it back in August.
And they set it back in August.
And in fairness, there was, from memory, an attempt to bring in a co-payment model in Australia, I think about 10 years ago, and that was pushed back on very firmly there.
I went to Australia in 1999, at the end of an Ashes series, which we'd been hammered in again, sadly. It went to a one-day international at the mighty MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, where the fourth test is about to begin. Fantastic stadium. And I had some minor ailments, and I went in to the equivalent of the GP surgery, and as I went out, the very nice personal reception said that would be $25, please, which back then was a lot more than $25 today. And I could afford it, but it kind of hit me right there. Yeah. And I don't want people in this country to see healthcare as something that they have to pay for.
Now, to be clear, in Australia, there are surgeries that provide something called bulk billing, where you don't have to pay that particular amount of money. But I just think in this country there is this kind of crude dichotomy where people either think of an American model, which I think is too corporatised, or I think the NHS model, which I think is too socialised, to put it in, crude political terminology. I think, and again, I don't necessarily think a co-payment is the option, but I don't think enough's been done to incentivise people to move into a stronger private healthcare system. In Australia, for example, you do have a very strong parallel private healthcare system, and then you have incentives like, for example, tax rebates to be able to get private healthcare. It feels like there isn't that same push to push people into private healthcare that have the means to be able to do so.
Almost inevitably, if you start to go down that route, you will get a much more formalised, because there is to an extent already a two-tier system in this country, because there are some people who do have private healthcare. I don't, but there are some people who do, and they can get seen more quickly. I don't want a formalised two-tier healthcare system in this country. Inevitably, poorer people, many of whom will be watching GB News, people on lower incomes, people who might be retired, I don't want those people to get an inferior quality of care.
But you must appreciate that if you do have a stronger private system and more people go into that system, it alleviates pressure on the public system, so the poor people that you just mentioned will be seen more quickly. Surely that makes sense.
Well, and I don't want to put the burden on more business, but a lot of employers actually provide private sort of insurance, health insurance for their employees, which could be a route to freeing up actually a lot of the problems that we see. But the people that are watching, as you say, Matthew, I want to make sure these people get the appointment that they need.
Well, we want to be attracting good British doctors, don't we? At the moment, we are reliant on good doctors from abroad. We should be somehow funding doctors better than we are.
But it's about the value. To Will's point, it's about the value of the NHS. And I don't think we value it in this country. I think people use it far too much as I hate to say this on Christmas Day, but I think people use it as a first port of call as opposed to a last resort at times. I think people...
What evidence is do you have for that?
People call...
Is that a hunch?
Because if you want to book a GP appointment, you can't get one.
That's
because
not true in my case. I live in a very busy part of London, and I can honestly say, when I want to get a GP appointment, I've never been disappointed.
Well, in Scotland, tell that to the people of Scotland.
Anecdotally, I've heard from many GB News viewers where they find it very difficult to get an appointment. I was speaking to Matthew Talbot in the green room only...
I'm sorry?
Matthew Talbot...
No, I heard. I was just sorry. A little Christmas joke there.
Can I well, just very quickly...
No, but I want to say, like, it's taking... He's still waiting, I think he said another 6 months for his ACL. Yeah. Again, not a life-threatening injury, but the waiting time for that, I actually asked him, mate, you look like you're back on the mend and walking freely. The surgery was a success. And he went, no, it's still about 6 or 7 months.
Well, all you're saying is if he were wealthy enough to pay for, and I don't know what his personal circumstances are, just using him as an example because you're talking anecdotally, but presumably, if he were wealthy enough, or if he is wealthy enough and wanted to spend the money, he could already do that.
Yes.
What I don't want to happen, certainly for bog standard issues, I'm not talking necessarily about sports injuries or whatever, is for there to be a formalised two-tier system. By the way, I'm not saying there aren't major problems with the NHS. It is still, I think, Labour government policy that the NHS is broken. They recognise it. What they need to do for the good of the people that we're talking about and for the good of their electoral chances is to make it clearer that they're doing better.
But this is the fundamental problem with socialism, is that...
They're not socialist, Will. Come on, they're not socialist. Look up the definition of socialism.
Come on, mate. If Matthew was to take a spot on the private healthcare, list and get that ACL injury sorted more quickly, that frees up a spot
they're the same
for someone
doctors.
on the NHS.
They're basically the same doctors.
No, that's not true.
Well,
you
hang
can
on.
create a parallel system in which you have private healthcare providers and public healthcare providers.
In the end, you've still got the same number of people being treated by doctors. And if what you're suggesting is you suck more doctors away from the NHS into a private system, the NHS is going to deteriorate for people who can't afford private healthcare.
I don't have the exact statistics on me, but I've seen statistics in the last year that have said that there are plenty of people with medical degrees in this country that have been being turned away from jobs. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but that is something which I've spoken about with Dr. Renee on a different show. We will move on from this because there is actually plenty of news to get through in the pages of tomorrow's Boxing Day newspapers. I want to move to the Daily Telegraph. A teacher likened to a terrorist for a Trump film. Charlie, you've been doing my research for me here. What's going on?
Well, as a little Santa's helper, I was diving into this in the green room, and it's beggars belief. At a time where the government have just announced that they're going to scrap those non-hate crime incidents because of too many people are calling up.
They haven't announced it. That's police chiefs who are going to propose it to government.
And good for them, and I can't wait for that to come forward because
that hasn't been leaked by the Labor Party? That was my understanding.
My understanding, if it was police chiefs, are going to put plans to the Home Secretary, who is believed to be supportive of it.
And I can't wait.
And I think it's a good thing, by the way.
Quite right.
It's a good thing.
But just when you then have that, which you shouldn't be be calling up the police to sort of, call them because you've been, offended by hurty words on a WhatsApp group. What's going to happen is what we're seeing in the Telegraph today, where a teacher in a college, at Henley College, played videos of Donald Trump, and somebody reported that to Prevent, which is the National UK Home Office security...
Counter-terrorism program.
Counter-terrorism police, because they thought this man obviously needed to be reported for terrorist activity by showing a Donald Trump video. That is ridiculous. So you take away the non-hate crime instance, which we think is madness anyway, you're going to see more and more people reported to Prevent, which is supposed to, a programme which basically rounds up, in what, from a better word, people that have been reported for looking at maybe terrorist material that could be subject to pursuing those kinds of activities, harming us all. They need to be put on a programme to put on the straight and narrow. We're now having teachers in our classrooms being reported.
Well,
that's insane.
That's interesting. Teachers, Matthew, I think you would agree that this incident is a bit silly. Do you think it is an isolated incident, or do you think it speaks to a systemic institutional bias in education in this country?
Absolutely no idea, because I haven't been taught in a school or in a university for a very long time. My children are 11 months and 3 years old. If it were to be... Well, first of all, the facts of the case, it's tricky to know the truth, and whether this is sensationalised. I think it's under investigation at the moment by the college, and therefore, look, there's sometimes more than meets the eye in any particular story. But if what has happened is a teacher at a school or a college showed a video of Donald Trump's inauguration or whatever it was to his politics class, and he's then being referred to Prevent, then if that is the scenario, that to me sounds completely bonkers.
The college claimed that one of the videos had made one of the students feel quite uncomfortable.
Well, that is
quite
nonsense.
Uncomfortable.
Yes. And listen. I don't want to comment on a particular student, but my view is, both in schools, but particularly in universities, there shouldn't be safe spaces when it comes to the exchange and the debate of ideas. I happen to think that some of Donald Trump's policies over his 2 terms so far, his 1 and a bit terms, are extreme. And I think I stand very strongly against a lot of what he does. Not least, by the way, his rhetoric. Today, did you see his Christmas message? His Christmas message involved saying Happy Christmas to everyone, including far-left radical scum. If you can't find a less Christian, if you can find a less Christian or a less presidential word than that on Christmas Day, I'm sure there are a handful, but not many.
A neat pivot indeed, and I agree with the first part of your comments, which is it is wrong to have safe spaces in places of learning. Places of learning should be places for rigorous debate and discussion, and I'm worried in our institutions, particularly within universities, we're forgetting that. Coming up, we'll look at the newspaper's coverage of what the Royals got up to on Christmas Day. Beatrice and Eugenie joined the King at Sandringham instead of spending the day with their mum and dad. This is Patrick Christys tonight, late edition with me, Will Kingston.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christys tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
You that every one of those tickets will be sold. Guaranteed.
I guess they
because
will.
There'll be a corporate ticket, you know, that's the thing. So there'll be corporate organisations that buy the tickets en masse. Is that the ticket price from FIFA for the game, or is that the up ticket?
That's the legit price.
Yeah,
that's before the scalping happens. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The cheapest tickets for the final in the USA now cost more than £3,000.
But then if you look at Wimbledon, how much Wimbledon is for a final, it's just absolutely extreme. And, you know, so you are completely knocking out the mainstream fan, and just you've got the elite.
I mean, it's a bit of a contrast to Qatar, where the prices weren't that high. Obviously, a bit tricky to, you know, not cheap to get there, but not cheap to get to the States either. But obviously, for Qatar, it was about putting yourself on the world sporting map and using its diplomacy. Whereas in the States, it's about making the dollar.
Well, I can also just say that they've got the Pride match. It's going to be played at the World Cup. It's in Seattle, and it's against it's Iran versus Egypt.
So both of whom have asked for it not to be the Pride match.
Both of whom have asked not to be. But the only other teams, the only other game in that group that they could could use as the Pride match is the USA versus Australia, and they can't because that's also their dedicated anti-slavery match. Yeah, so it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Are any of them themed around
Can't they swap them
football?
round?
Well, still, that doesn't work, does it? Because of the other two nations.
Yeah, I think that's worse.
Like Iran, I don't know, they're still a bit slavey, aren't they?
Can't they just put football?
Modern slavery is an issue across the world.
Yeah. But I just, I don't know, it just cracks me up. Like, why? So we've got. Why are we doing any of this?
It should just be.
But also, then stop. If you care so much about these issues, stop giving World Cups. Like in 2036, it's in Saudi Arabia, which does have modern slavery and kills gay people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. This is Patrick Christys tonight, late edition with me, Will Kingston, only on GB News. Thank you for staying with us. If you are still with us, it's been a heroic effort after, no doubt, what I hope was a lovely Christmas day, and we will make sure that we will keep you hooked until the end of the hour. One more front page has come in. This one is from The Sun. I'll be there for you. The Sun coming through at their punny best. Andrew's girls join the king for Christmas, insinuating that may be raising questions as to why they weren't spending the day with their mum and dad. Quite frankly, I've had enough of Andrew's stories, or even tangential Andrew stories, for this week, so we'll leave The Sun there for now. I want to get the thoughts of my panel, though, on a different story from The Eye, and that is, of course, former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley and political commentator Matthew Studland. The threat to Labor from Reform and the Greens puts the UK in a new political era. Now, for most of our lifetimes, it's been effectively a two-party system. There's obviously been the Liberal Democrats, but effectively a two-party system. We're entering an age now where you legitimately have a relatively even vote split across 5 or 6 parties. I think a lot of people are talking about the impact of reform or the impact of the Greens. Not as many people are talking about the impact of the change of that political system in its entirety. What does having 5 or 6 parties all getting a very noticeable vote share actually mean for the UK?
Well, it's fascinating, and it's really interesting when it comes to the method by which we choose our governments. In other words, first past the post. Last time round, because of the insertion of reform into the political arena in quite a serious way, when Nigel Farage became leader at the last moment. I mean, do you remember he wasn't going to run as an MP, and then he changed tack after coming under some heavy fire from figures on the right. But the insertion of reform, and it had been building, to be fair to Richard Tice, not something I'm necessarily inclined to be, but to be fair to Richard Tice, it was building already before Farage actually became leader. And that split the vote on the right, and that helped deliver Labour a massive majority in terms of seats. Not in a dissimilar way to the fact that when Farage stood candidates down in, I think, hundreds of seats, wasn't it, in 2019, that helped deliver Boris Johnson his majority. And this time round, it looks almost certain, if you believe what's coming out of the mouths of reform people, that they will not do a pact with the Conservatives, that they were determined to destroy the Tories last time round, and they now want to win outright on their own. Whether that eventuates or not, I'm not sure. The threat of the Greens, which talked a bit about, we barely talked about your party, which I think is interesting, because Kemi Badenoch arguably has had a bit of a bounce recently, a bit of cut through. The threat of the Greens to Labour is profound for Labour, but also very significant potentially for reform, and I'll tell you why. At the next election, at the moment, if things continue as they are, with Labour being as unpopular as they are, the best Labour can hope for is that people will be so determined not to deliver number 10 to Nigel Farage, and an overwhelming majority of the population at the moment don't want Farage to be Prime Minister, even though they've been consistently ahead in the polls.
They don't want Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister. There are no popular politicians overall in this country.
Hang on, I'm making the point that although Reform are consistently ahead in the polls, the overwhelming majority of people in this country don't want Farage or Reform in power. So the best at the moment that Labour can hope for is for people to vote tactically and to get behind Labour as the biggest party on the left. The reason the Greens are so threatening to Labour at the moment is because if enough people say, well, look, it's not my issue. If people are going to vote for Farage, I'll vote for Farage. I am not going to vote for Labour because I am so disappointed with them, or I disagree so fundamentally with them, or I think they've gone too far to the right to try and regain some of the votes they may have lost to the right. In that circumstance, that's a major problem for Labour, and it's very helpful to Farage.
Yeah, I actually think, despite the fact that Farage is a divisive political figure, he's loved by many, he's disliked by many as well, I'm not convinced that that is actually a problem, particularly considering that Kemi Badenoch is not popular, Keir Starmer is obviously very unpopular. It's obviously clear now that you don't need to have a popular leader in order to gain power.
The right is split, and the reason the Greens are significant, exactly, and that's the reason that it's significant, Zach Polanski's emergence, because now the left is as split as it is. Labour cannot rely on the right being split to get into power.
This is totally bunkum. The idea that people don't want Nigel Farage to become Prime Minister, you know, everyone is going to be against you. Everybody, if you add up all the polling percentage, is against Keir Starmer. They were against the Tories when Boris Johnson was in. Unless you get over 50% of the polling, then of course
very different.
The rest of the public are going to be against
Charlie.
you.
Come on, you know it's
so
different.
The idea,
people have stronger feelings about Farage.
But the idea, I'm not so sure that's true anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure that's true anymore.
The idea that we could wake up in 2029 after the next general election and there'll be a rainbow coalition of Labour clinging on with the support of the Greens, the Lib Dems, the Your Party, the, you know, God knows what other party they can get into. That would be anarchy.
But I'll challenge that in the sense that we just saw from those recent Wales by-elections and council elections that strategic voting did hurt Reform there. How concerned should they be about a Frankenstein coalition on the left coming together and actually beating them?
I totally no. It will hurt. It could hurt in terms of the voting, in terms of getting the number of seats. But if Nigel Farage came out on top with the highest number of seats, if the Tories held their number, they might even have one or two gains because they lost a huge amount at the last election, nobody needs reminding. But if Labour lose significantly the number of seats, but they are then hanging on, clinging on by their fingertips, like Santa down a chimney, with every grip that they can, just being supported by the Lib Dems, the Greens and anyone else. That is something that I don't think the public will want.
Just to come back to Will's point, I think a key at the moment, and things can change very, very quickly in politics, they can certainly change in the next 2-3 years, whatever it is. A key question is that what we've been identifying, I think, are people more determined that Farage does not become Prime Minister than they are determined that Starmer doesn't become Prime Minister again, if Starmer is still in number 10. My view is that, yes, he's very unpopular, Starmer. My view is that because Farage's politics are as extreme as I think they are, he faces a bigger battle on that analysis than Starmer does. I may be wrong. That's my view at the moment.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah, you really?
I really think. I think there are more people that are prepared to sign up to become Reform members and go out and to knock on a door to say, vote Reform, vote for Nigel as Prime Minister, than there is for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think there is a level of hatred.
They've got a very strong, as do the Tories, but they've got a very strong electioneering makeup. The Reform do not yet have that.
That is true. That is true. And we will be discussing those concerns with, or getting a reaction, I should say, sorry, both to those concerns, as well as claims from the Conservative Party chairman, Kevin Hollingake, that some Reform UK voters are far right. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, late edition with me, Will Kingston, on GB News, the People's Channel.
Merry
Merry Christmas and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. The dry theme is set to continue through the next few days and Boxing Day will be generally pretty bright. There'll be plenty of winter sunshine out there for most of us. It will be still quite windy though in the south, and that's just courtesy of the ice bars here being that bit closer together, so not as windy as on Christmas Day, but still a chilly easterly breeze nonetheless. And that easterly breeze continues through this evening across more southern regions of the UK. There will be a bit more in the way of cloud developing as well, and that might just prevent temperatures from falling quite as low as elsewhere. So patchy frost in the south and more widespread frost across more northern and western areas, and temperatures in the rural areas potentially dipping several degrees below freezing. But where winds are lighter across more northern parts of Scotland, we could well see some freezing fog patches redeveloping through the course of the night, particularly through parts of the Highlands, the Moray Firth, for example, so these fog patches could be quite stubborn to clear through Boxing Day. Otherwise, the west coast of Scotland, Northern Ireland, gloriously sunny here, blue skies and not much in the way of cloud at all. Still plenty of sunshine for Northern England, North Wales and the North Midlands as well, but running into more in the way of cloud probably for more southern regions of the UK. And here, there'll still be a fairly brisk easterly wind through the day on Boxing Day, so it will still feel pretty cold out and about. Despite the temperature on the thermometer reading 5 or 6 degrees, it will feel close to freezing. And with the wind still coming in from an easterly direction, it will be those east-facing coasts and some southern regions that will be feeling the kind of the chill the most. So here, still gusts of 30 to 40 miles per hour through the afternoon. Much lighter winds, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. The winds subtly shift direction as we go into Saturday, bringing more in the way of cloud, though, probably for many central and eastern parts of the UK. So overall a cloudier day, the best of the sunshine probably for more western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The dry and settle theme, though, is set to continue through the weekend and into next week as well. A mixture of cloud and sunny spells, and still the chance of some overnight frost.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Patrick Christys tonight, late edition with me, Will Kingston, on GB News on a very special day as we count down the minutes to the end of Christmas. If you're still with us, and I'm looking at the ratings, and there are millions around the world. I'm just kidding.
That aren't watching.
That is a Herculean feat after a day that no doubt, and I hope, included feasting and fun with family and friends. The Conservative Party chairman has reignited his war of words with Reform UK, saying that some of Nigel Farage's party are far right. Kevin Hollinrake said they are right of centre on some things. I don't think Nigel Farage himself is far right. I think some people who follow Reform are far right. He went on to accuse them of being left-wing because of their economic policies, like wanting to scrap the 2-child limit on benefits. We're joined by political consultant for Reform UK, Jack Anderton, to respond to these claims. Jack, welcome, and I guess for the next 23 minutes, a very Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for joining us at this time and on this special day. How would you respond to those claims that have been made by Kevin Hollinrake?
Well, I think Kevin should be totally ashamed of himself for essentially tarring potentially millions of people as racist or far right in our country. And this comes just off the back of a few weeks ago, Kevin comparing one of our incredibly well-selling, by the way, football shirts, and compared it to a Nazi symbol. So he has form with this comparison. And in his
to be clear, he didn't say millions, though. The exact wording, though, was some people he thought in Reform are far right.
Well, he said a minority. So, for example, I did some quick calculations before I came on air. Say, for example, in 2029, Reform gain about 9 million votes and win the next general election, which is similar to what Labour did. A small minority, say 1 in 10, is almost 900,000 people. That's almost 1 million people. So the onus is really on Kevin to actually be more specific about who he is talking about and how many people he is talking about, because currently he is tarring hundreds of thousands, even millions of people as racist and far right, and he should be totally ashamed of himself for doing that. And it's actually similar rhetoric that we've heard from the Prime Minister, who a couple of weeks ago said that Reform's, quote, racist rhetoric was tearing the country apart. Now, both of the two major parties are using this rhetoric and denigrating and insulting Reform and our supporters, because they know that actually they cannot win the argument in public. They cannot win the argument and the battle of ideas for the general population. They know that Reform is on the rise, and they don't have any idea on how to counter it.
Yeah, look, I think that is a fair response. In every political party, most people will be good people, and in every political party you will have a fringe, and that doesn't matter whether it's Reform, the Conservatives, Labor, or so on. So I think he's actually potentially on firmer ground when he says that some of the Reform policies are left-wing, for example, wanting to scrap the two-child limit on benefits. How would you respond to the claim that in many ways Reform, at least when it comes to economics, is more left-leaning than it is right-leaning?
I mean, I think that's a totally made-up talking point by the Conservative Party. And actually, what they don't specify about the two-child benefit policy that Reform has is it's for working people. So it's to support working people with children. And I absolutely think that that is right. In terms of left-wing economics, Nigel Farage, for more than a decade now, has been banging the drum for lower taxes and a decrease in regulation. So to say that Reform is left-wing economically, I think is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, and I think that it is absolutely essential that this country makes serious spending cuts very, very quickly, or there will be an economic, there will be severe economic consequences to that, and potentially economic consequences before we can even get to an election. But it is also very, very hard to take money away from people after they start getting it. Are you actually confident that Reform could implement, in terms of the political difficulty, implement the types of spending cuts that are necessary to get this economy back on firm fiscal footing?
Well, I think what you've seen with Nigel over his career, and even Reform figures, in the wider party, is that as a party, we are not afraid to make tough decisions. Nigel coming back last year and running in Clacton was a tough decision, and it paid off. Starting this party, starting Reform and pushing that forward was a tough decision. So you have seen throughout his career and throughout Richard's career and throughout Zia's career and everyone's senior in the party, is they have made tough calls and tough decisions. And they know, because I know they know, I speak to them regularly, they know just what is needed and the fight that is needed to turn around our country.
Yeah. Well, in the interests of balance, there are some senior Conservatives who are out in the public, in the papers, supporting Reform in some capacity. We've noted on the Daily Telegraph front page tomorrow, give Reform seats in the Lords. Senior Tory tells Starmer. So Keir Starmer should grant Reform UK seats in the House of Lords. This is from Lord True. I'm assuming that you would be firmly supportive of that particular suggestion.
I think it's only right. I think it's right to give representation to the party that has been leading the last 150 opinion polls. We're now at about 32% in most opinion polls that you will see. So it's only right to give the people of the country who are supporting our party representation in the House of Lords. It's about time. I think it could do with a shake-up. And I think I'd like to see a couple of Reform figures in the House of Lords.
Final question for you, and this goes to what we were talking about before, and this is the great unknown of the next 3.5 years. It's a very, very long time in politics. I think even the most ardent Reform supporter would recognise that at the moment it is still in many ways a start-up party. It's done incredibly well in terms of the polling, to your point, in a very short period of time, but the operational machinery isn't built out in the same way it's built out for Labor or the Conservatives. They've had decades and decades of a head start on Reform. How can the Reform Party actually build out an operational apparatus capable not just of winning an election, but then actually governing pragmatically in such a short space of time? Some people don't think it's achievable.
Well, it's a mammoth task. I don't think anyone has shied away from that. But what I would say is it requires time, and we do have some time, but it also requires people. And what I would encourage anyone watching and anyone who's thinking about getting involved to get involved. If you haven't become a member, get involved with your local branch, apply to be a candidate. You know, we need thousands of candidates for the local elections, and we'll need obviously 650 candidates for the general election. So if you're really passionate about changing Britain and about reversing our decline, the most important aspect of that is getting great people involved.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you very much, Jack. We really appreciate you joining us on what is on a special day. Merry Christmas. Hope you have a fantastic Boxing Day. In the interest of balance, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest you get active in the political process for whatever party you may be, passionate about. I'll show to you, Charlie, about that question on the difficulty that Reform will face getting the back office effectively right. You know, people knocking on doors, going out asking for votes, the policy makers trying to actually work out positions. You know, it isn't just the people who sit in the Parliament. There is a huge apparatus that sits behind any party. Are you confident Reform can do it?
I am, yeah, and I'm sure they will, because they've got a few years to do it. They're getting good people in, it seems to me, or thoughtful people at least, but on all of those issues, you know, are there people who are far-right activists that support Reform? Yes, there will be. Are there bad eggs in the Tory party? Totally. The same with every party. That's why Nigel Farage has said he's having one of the most strictest vetting processes to wheedle those people out. But that's not to take away from the fact that they have got a bit of momentum. They have got the people that will do the knocking on the doors and delivering the leaflets and all the rest of it. And that's why, very fairly, just on the Lords, there should be people from Reform in the Lords.
Matthew, it's not that I don't want to hear your response. It's just that the Great British Giveaway is that important. It's your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, an incredible £85,000 in cash. Hayley Sparks has been on a magical trip to Lapland and has all the details you need for a chance to make it yours.
This Christmas, we're giving you the chance to win our biggest cash prize of the year.
An incredible £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to make your new year the best yet.
And we've come to the fabulously festive Aurora Collection Resort here in Lapland to celebrate.
Imagine what next year could look like for you with a whopping £85,000 in the bank.
You could find yourself on the adventure of a lifetime, or just safe in the knowledge that next year is on us. £85,000 of tax-free cash really could be yours. Go on, give it a go, and Merry Christmas!
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 9th of February 2026. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck, ladies and gentlemen. After the break, we'll be rounding up the Boxing Day papers, and I'm hearing hot off the presses an incredible story of a cat that was lost, but now it is found. What a way to end your Christmas day. This is Patrick Christys Tonight Late Edition with me, Will Kingston, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations forecast.
Whilst high pressure close to the UK brings plenty of dry and bright weather, we do have some heavy rain in central Mediterranean and colder than average weather pushing into parts of Iberia, just 7 degrees there in Lisbon with some showery rain expected later. Showers also moving through eastern parts of Spain, the Balearics, moving into Sardinia, Corsica, Italy, some wet weather and some gusty winds. Mostly fine in Greece and plenty of sunshine to continue into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, DC.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight Late Edition. Thank you again so much for spending your Christmas night with us on GB News. We are humbled to be in your living rooms this evening on what is a very special day. Some breaking news in the last 20 or 30 minutes. President Donald Trump has said the US has launched a powerful and deadly strike against the Islamic State group in northwestern Nigeria. You may recall earlier in the week that we reported that there had been an aid package that had been provided by Donald Trump to Nigeria on the condition of certain protections for Christians in the country. In a post on Truth Social, the US president described IS as terrorist scum, accusing them of, and I quote, targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians. This is obviously a rapidly developing story and breaking. Your thoughts, your instinctive response to this?
I'm astonished by this news because we were talking on the show a couple of nights ago, weren't we, about Donald Trump's interference, if you like, in Nigerian politics on behalf of Christians who he wants to identify with. I imagine because he feels there are votes there. Why am I astonished? Because there's a massive escalation from rhetoric to actually striking a sovereign territory. IS, of course, an evil, deeply messed up organisation. But to strike a sovereign territory in that way, I'm gobsmacked, and it runs counter to what Trump tends to stand for, which is hands off America first.
Charlie, a very quick response from you.
Well, I think just in his post he just goes on to say the Department for War executed the strikes and under his leadership he will not allow radical Islamic terrorism to prosper. And I think that's a sentiment we should all share.
Well, this is something which we'll be discussing in the days to come, no doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, very quickly on the papers that we've been speaking about this evening. The Mirror, the King's message to the nation. The Sun, I'll be there for you. Very punny from the Sun as usual. The Independent, shock poll. 1/3 of Labor voters say Starmer should quit. We've talked about that tonight and I've expressed my shock that it's that low. The Eye, the threat to Labor from Reform and the Greens puts the UK in a new political era. The Telegraph, teacher likened to terrorists for Trump films, still going through this sort of stuff. The Guardian, expert criticises lost decade of progress on rights for parents. We hear from The Times, 25 people a day are dying on an NHS waiting list in Scotland specifically. In the Daily Mail, Reeves' $1 billion Boxing Day sales slump, and The Express, you give children the gift of freedom. £100,000 for youngsters' personalised wheelchairs. That's all from us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for being with us. We hope you had a lovely Christmas. Have a fantastic Boxing Day. And thank you from everyone at GB News. Good night.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Merry Christmas and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. The dry theme is set to continue through the next few days and Boxing Day will be generally pretty bright. There'll be plenty of winter sunshine out there for most of us. It will be still quite windy though in the south, and that's just courtesy of the ice bars here being that bit closer together, so not as windy as on Christmas Day but still a chilly easterly breeze nonetheless. And that easterly breeze continues through this evening across more southern regions of the UK. There will be a bit more in the way of cloud developing as well, and that might just prevent temperatures from falling quite as low as elsewhere. So patchy frost in the south and more widespread frost across more northern and western areas, and temperatures in the rural areas potentially dipping several degrees below freezing. But where winds are lighter across more northern parts of Scotland, we could well see some freezing fog patches redeveloping through the course of the night, particularly through parts of the Highlands, the Moray Firth, for example. So these fog patches could be quite stubborn to clear through Boxing Day. Otherwise, the west coast of Scotland, Northern Ireland, gloriously sunny here, blue skies and not much in the way of cloud at all. Still plenty of sunshine for Northern England, North Wales and the North Midlands as well. But running into more in the way of cloud probably for more southern regions of the UK. And here, there'll still be a fairly brisk easterly wind through the day on Boxing Day, so it will still feel pretty cold out and about. Despite the temperature on the thermometer reading 5 or 6 degrees, it will feel close to freezing. And with the wind still coming in from an easterly direction, it will be those east-facing coasts and some southern regions that will be feeling the kind of the chill the most. So here, still gusts of 30 to 40 miles per hour through the afternoon. Much lighter winds, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. The winds subtly shift direction as we go into Saturday, bringing more in the way of cloud, though, probably for many central and eastern parts of the UK. So overall a cloudier day, the best of the sunshine probably for more western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The dry and settle theme, though, is set to continue through the weekend and into next week as well. A mixture of cloud and sunny spells, and still the chance of some overnight frost.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
A very Merry Christmas to you all from the Aurora Collection Resort in Lapland.
We're on an amazing Arctic adventure to celebrate our greatest cash giveaway, a simply stunning £85,000.
And this Christmas, we're giving you the chance to win it all. So don't miss out this Christmas.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.co.uk gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.